If Penn State beats Ohio State this season, well, the Buckeyes have nobody to blame but themselves.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. You are locked on to Penn State football. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zakee, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. He is Pat Korbler, special guest coming back to the show, writes for Black Shoe Diaries and covers all things Penn State football. Pat, we're going to talk about how Ohio State essentially gave Penn State the key factor here into beating the Buckeyes this season. So really, Ohio State has nobody to blame but themselves. But part of this conversation, if you're going to beat Ohio State, how do you stop? How do you limit Jeremiah Smith? And then is there too much pressure on the Nittany Lions this season? Some people are saying they're number one. Experts that write these preview magazines, multiple of them are saying that Penn State is the best team and should be a national title favorite going into the season. So what should be Penn State's expectations? And is the pressure too much to handle? So Pat, let's begin with the key to beating the Buckeyes this season is Jim Knowles. There's really no other way to dress it up, that the best defensive coordinator goes from Ohio State, who just won a national title, to a team that's trying to push, trying to raise the bar and take that next step. And in order to take that next step, you have to beat Ohio State.
Absolutely. I think when you look at what Penn State is getting with Jim Knowles is, obviously a very good defensive coordinator, someone who's won a national championship. And I've seen that a lot of the conversation recently, comparing Ohio State's defenses in the past, their defense last year, one of the very best in the country, with Penn State's this year, is what can Jim Knowles do with especially that back end group, the safety group, which has been so good at Penn State in recent years with Jalen Reed and Kevin Winston and J.R. Brown and, guys like that, even going back to Jaquan Brisker. Mm-hmm. One of the things that really unlocked Jim Knowles' defense at Ohio State was getting someone like Caleb Downs. Does Penn State have that player? And I think that is the big question mark. Not that that's the only way that Ohio State or the Jim Knowles defense can necessarily work, but having a Caleb Downs at the back end of the defense really changed things for how Ohio State could play. They could be more aggressive, knowing that if you're bringing Caleb Downs up, he's probably not going to be someone that misses tackles. Just an expert when you have him drop back into coverage and reading quarterbacks and stuff like that. So is Zakee Wheatley that guy? And not to push it back on you, Zach, but when Wheatley was recruit, I was very high on him. I think I was higher on him than the recruiting sites. He was kind of looked at as a higher 3-star, lower 4-star. I had him as a top 150 level guy. I think he's done a lot of good things at Penn State so far, and he's ready for that next step as being the number one safety at Penn State. But is he Caleb Downs? I think that's a big, crazy question to ask, and I just don't know if athletically and size-wise, everything that Caleb Downs brings, if Wheatley has that.
So I think I'm not going to say that Zakee Wheatley is the best safety in college football, because that is reserved for Caleb Downs. System does matter. Sure. I think Zakee Wheatley is going to benefit from the way that he's going to be utilized. So to answer the Zakee Wheatley piece of the puzzle in this equation here, and then what Jim Knowles, by leaving Ohio State, does for Penn State. So you bring up a point that, okay, from the schematics and player personnel, in order to run a true Jim Knowles defense to its highest caliber, you need your safety. You need your safeties to be as talented as possible, or you at least need that superstar. Zakee Wheatley can be that superstar. Is he going to be Caleb Downs, top tier elite, 99 overall in your video game type? Maybe not necessarily, but let me point out the fact that Wheatley can be first team all conference, or it definitely contend there, right? Okay, if you're going to take multiple safeties, Caleb Downs can be one, Wheatley can be the other. Wheatley has those traits where he's able to force turnovers, and I think the biggest difference in a Knowles defense is the free safety is brought down into the box. It plays closer to the football. Not instead of that center field, which what he was doing with Tom Allen's defense. Remember, they shuffled a lot of things last year. With the injury to KJ Winston, that changed everything. That changed a lot of things. So Zakee Wheatley had to play out of position, and Jalen Reed had to play out of position because of that injury to KJ Winston. So if Wheatley and everybody else can stay healthy for the most part, because I circle Wheatley as a player that Penn State cannot afford to lose precisely for this reason. He's going to force more turnovers. He is going to be more of a true game changer. Well, you will see him more so in the box score. The questions that, oh, he can't tackle as well. He can tackle. He's not just a guy that picks the football off. We've seen it. You can go look at the stats from the past couple of seasons. Wheatley is a sure-handed tackler. It shows up on tape. It shows up in the box score, but you will see it more because I don't think he's forced as many turnovers because he hasn't been able to be that aggressive safety we know him to be. Now, back to the Jim Knowles point, part of it is you are bringing the secrets of Ohio State over, and I get it. You're going to have Matt Patricia at DC. That's not what Jim Knowles is there. It's going to be about what does Ryan Day want to do with the offense? What are the nuances that you didn't have before about Ohio State's system? Knowles brings that. Knowles also brings a day-to-day iron sharpens iron type of situation, Pat, where Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles get to go head-to-head against each other in practice. Okay, Jim Knowles built the formula to stop Andy Kotelnicki's offense a season ago. The only other team to do that was Notre Dame. Or limit in a sense, yeah. Right? They won those games. Okay, well, Oregon still gave up 37 points. So I'm saying that the team, the coordinator that really stifled Penn State's offense the most, Jim Knowles, is now over at Penn State as opposed to that foe in the Buckeyes.
No, that's a massive part of it. And I know, right, even for Kotelnicki going back to his Kansas days, like one of the few teams that gave, as Kansas started going, obviously, when Leipold and Kotelnicki got there, they struggled against everyone. But even in Oklahoma State, Knowles had really good success against his Kansas offense. And so I know there was, I don't know who wrote it on ESPN, there was an article earlier this offseason kind of talking about Jim Knowles going from Ohio State to Penn State and how him and Kotelnicki have kind of, hit it off, it seems, as far as getting along, which if we know anything about Jim Knowles leaving Ohio State, that was a piece of the pie was kind of how he was getting along with the rest of the coaches. Yeah. But that's a major factor for Kotelnicki to have an idea of kind of what Knowles is seeing from the outside and now, obviously seeing from the inside as they go against each other in practice all the time. I think the other side of this, and this isn't so much like Jim Knowles versus Ohio State's offense, just because, and I know we'll talk about Jeremiah Smith here in a second, but right, like I think Ohio State's offense is still going to be very good. I think the other key to getting Jim Knowles, like, yes, it helps Penn State that they have Jim Knowles. It also hurts Ohio State that they do not. And the fact that they hire Matt Patricia, which, hey, maybe Matt Patricia just ends up being a great college defense coordinator. Maybe he took I think he took a year or two off. I think it was just a year off from coaching. And maybe that reinvigorated him and he's going to be firing on all cylinders at Ohio State. He comes out and he's going to be a great defense coordinator. I think that's a wild hire for a program like Ohio State. If I would have had to guess, like, where does Matt Patricia start if he wants to break into the college game, it would have been like a North Carolina with Bill Belichick or a Georgia Tech or a Minnesota, right? Like a mid-tier 7-5, 8-4 type program, not the defending national champions who, still have a talented defense, but now have this expectation of excellence after Jim Knowles, but yet they've lost so many guys from last year's defense. So just interesting in that regard that, yes, it helps Penn State to get Jim Knowles, but leaving Ohio State replacing him with someone questionable, Matt Patricia. I know if Matt Patricia had came to Penn State, I don't know how I would feel about that. I talked myself into him, but I wouldn't have been a fan at the time.
No, I don't know if that would have been an upgrade from Tom Allen. Okay, you know that Ohio State is they take a step backwards there. First time being a defensive coordinator at a program like this in this regard when you are the defending national champion. So you take a step back in offense, you take a step back in defense, and then there's a lot of things that you really have to get situated. You don't have that chemistry anymore. And now the best defensive coordinator in college football is over at Penn State, a team that you are going to face this season. That is a big deal. If you're Ohio State, I know they want to try to explain it away and that it's he had his issues here and there. He gave up a few big plays with his scheme. I know for a fact that Ohio State would want him as opposed to
Yeah.
Matt Patricia. So Knowles is bringing with him just not only what he knows from Ohio State, but knowledge of the game. And Jeremiah Smith is going to be one of the toughest players to stop this season. He's going to be a Heisman contender for a reason. So how does Penn State do that? What can Knowles scheme up to take away Jeremiah Smith? Well, we're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. And how's this for exciting? Are you new to FanDuel? Well, new customers can bet just $5, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. All you got to do is open up the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com. And like I said, Major League Baseball, pro golf, pro soccer, WNBA, even Penn State football. Penn State football hasn't started yet, but you can bet on Penn State football. Win totals, season props, game lines that are available right now, whether you like Penn State to cover against Nevada, right? You can bet all of that on FanDuel, and if you are new to FanDuel, you can use those bonus bets as well. So remember, if you are new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open up the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. I think the simple answer is to double Jeremiah Smith, but I kind of have a backwards way of doing that, Pat, because I still think that Penn State needs to be careful with Brandon Inniss, or you also remember, I think Max Clare is going to be a weapon for Ohio State this year, the tight end that transferred from Purdue to the Buckeyes. So you can't get away with winning one-on-one coverage everywhere else all of the time. I do think this is an interesting battle, though, because A.J. Harris versus Jeremiah Smith. Now, I'm not going to say, because I think I fell for that the one time with Kalen King against Marvin Harrison Jr.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
But I do genuinely believe that A.J. Harris is a better cornerback prospect, because hindsight's 2020, so we know that Kalen King didn't live up to that first-round potential, but we knew that he was an NFL-caliber cornerback. That's all here and there. A.J. Harris is getting that similar kind of conversation, where he is put into the conversation of being a potential first-round cornerback, and would be the first in Penn State history. Really, there's nobody that can cover Jeremiah Smith one-on-one. You have to double him. So in my mind, I say you take A.J. Harris, actually, or maybe you scheme up something where A.J. Harris is just on one boundary. You take away one side of the field. Okay, if you're going to line up Jeremiah Smith over there, so be it. But I do think A.J. Harris, maybe you put him on Brandon Inniss one-on-one. And then you have Elliott Washington with some safety help. So you still double Jeremiah Smith, but you don't take away A.J. Harris to where he can blanket another wide receiver, have maybe a little more of an even matchup, if you will.
Yeah, I don't know if the question is so much, right, how to stop Jeremiah Smith, because if you or I had those answers, no offense to the podcast, but right, we wouldn't be on the podcast. We'd be making millions of dollars as coaches. It's limiting him as much as possible, and I mean, it sucks because, like you said, I mean, Ohio State has so many talented guys. Carnell Tate is, I think, arguably a top 5, if not, let's even say top 10 wide receiver in the country, and he's their number 2. You mentioned getting Max Clare from Purdue, one of the very best tight ends in the country, just was in the same conference as Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland, and was playing for a bad Purdue team, but
yes,
they just have weapons after weapons still. It's funny that you do mention the Kalen King thing, because I do remember going into that Ohio State game with Marvin Harrison being like, what will Penn State do? Do they have Kalen King mirror him, right? Follow him to all sides of the field? And they decided to do that. They didn't give him a ton of help. It did not work out. So without like fully knowing the personnel and the schemes and stuff like that, right? Is A.J. Harris more comfortable on one side of the field or not? I feel pretty good about Elliott Washington as well, even before he had his, 6 of 6 winter workout, warrior tweet things that he won the awards. I think that you feel confident in both of those guys. But yeah, right, the defense is going to be slanted to Jeremiah Smith a little bit, but that's kind of the dangerous part of this Ohio State offense, whereas if you take Jeremiah Smith away, that leaves holes for Max Clare down the middle of the field. That leaves holes for Tate to get open. So I don't know if we like fully have a great answer other than you certainly can't let Jeremiah Smith beat you over at the top. And I think it's keeping things in front of you and trying to do that bend but don't break. Because, right, even we're saying with Kalen King and Marvin Harrison, how it didn't work. But yet, it was not the Penn State defense that lost that game. It was not, Marvin Harrison had a very good game, but it was Penn State's just complete inability offensively to do anything. So I think that's kind of the same case this year. And it has been the case in years past where the Penn State offense is going to have to be the one that steps up. I think that A.J. Harris and Elliott Washington and Zakee Wheatley and the defense as a whole can do a good enough job against this Ohio State offense. It's just a matter of Penn State's offense finally trying to keep up with the Buckeyes.
I'd like to see what they do with Max Clare what Penn State does defensively. Yeah. And again, Jim Knowles will know that if they're going to have Zakee Wheatley go up against him, or do you try to trust Tony Rojas? Because we've seen Tony Rojas actually be fairly successful in pass coverage. And last season, he was dealing with we presume an upper body injury because he was able to play, but he had questions with his tackling ability. That's hard to do when you only have one arm, or at least one healthy arm, right? But you still saw in pass coverage, hey, he's able to stick with it in coverage. He's able to make a play on the football. Tony Rojas, who's running a sub 440, I think is going to be able to go stride for stride, step for step with Max Clare. He's really good in pass coverage. So if you have that luxury for Penn State, again, all things considered, everybody's healthy and whatnot, right? You have Zakee Wheatley and Tony Rojas. You have to have both of them in order to be able to do this. You can run situations where Tony Rojas, that is an X factor matchup. After Jeremiah Smith and whatever, it's A.J. Harris or whatever Penn State decides to do, doubling him, leaving. Because I just don't want to see a situation where you give your best cornerback safety help, right? That's why I say that. I want you to put A.J. Harris in a situation where he's still one-on-one. But if it's Elliott Washington, if it's Adavian Collins, that's where I say, okay, it's justified to give them some extra help because I think they can hold their own to an extent. But A.J. Harris, you might as well not double up on that case and still allow Harris to do what he's able to do. But it's just, it is the tall task of Jeremiah Smith, right? I just don't think you over leverage that because then it will take away from other parts of the defense.
I think the other side of it, and not that Penn State's done necessarily a bad job in previous years, but it's getting pressure on the quarterback. I know last season they had 3 sacks. I think in 2023 they only had 2 sacks. 2022, I want to say it was 2 sacks as well. Maybe it's 3 sacks, but right. Like solid numbers. I don't think that you can expect to have like an 8-sack game against Ohio State, but just getting that situational pressure on the right situation, specifically on third downs, so that you can get off the field is going to be a big part of it. So, right, Zane Durant, Denai Denison, and especially by then, that's going to be, I think that game's November 1st, if I remember correctly. So having guys like Gilliam be ready, having Jalen Harvey at defensive end, hopefully, will have his feet underneath him by then. So stopping Jeremiah Smith is not just simply on the secondary; it's also on Penn State's pass rush as well.
Yeah, if you allow Sayin to sit back there and allow Smith to develop his route, those are those chunk plays and winning on third down. I do think Penn State will be able to stop or at least force Ohio State into situations where they are going to have to be in it. Hey, this is a 3rd and questionable, right? It's 3rd and 7, it's 3rd and 6, where you got to have those got to have it plays. I don't question Ohio State's offensive line too much. I think earlier in the summer I was a little more suspect of them, but they're still going to be a solid group, one way or another.
I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, but they are building up. So is that front 5 going to be as solid as they were a season ago on a national title run? I know they dealt with injuries and stuff, but again, this is still somewhat of a makeshift offensive line where you got players from the transfer portal. You don't return you don't return all those bona fide starters like Penn State is doing this season. So hopefully for Ohio State's case, that group gels by the time you have these more consequential games, and you're doing that with a new play caller, and you're doing that with a first-year starting quarterback and a second-year player overall, and Julian Sayin. In theory.
It is a shame that they do get them later in the year, right? It's November 1st because
you have the time to fix all those things. Texas, you're battle tested, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if we discussed this or not, Zach. I think that they do lose that Texas game. I think Texas goes into the shoe and upsets them. But I do think it's almost similar to like the 2014 season when they lose to Virginia Tech at home, right? Ohio State fans freak out, and then slowly but surely they build themselves back up. And yeah, this is just not a team that I would want to play later in the season, right? Ideally, if Penn State could get them. I mean, Penn State does have Oregon in September as well, so you don't want to front load the schedule too much. But I think for what Penn State has coming back compared to what, and Oregon as well, what Oregon and Ohio State have coming back, the earlier Penn State could have gone those teams, the better. Fortunate that they do get Oregon in September, and unfortunate they don't get Ohio State until November 1st because, yeah, like Julian saying will be, he will. I believe he will have his feet under him by then. So not ideal, but this is high-end, high-level college football. Like if Penn State wants to win a national title, they're going to have to beat really good teams and not the best of circumstances. So we'll see.
So, and that's part of their goals this season. You and I have hashed it out, whether this is a national title or bust type of season. Is this a beat Ohio State or bust type of season? Is there too much pressure on Penn State? Because more people than in years past have them ranked number one. Betting odds are the lowest this century. So there is a lot of buy-in to what Penn State is doing. Is it going to lead to them crumbling under the pressure? We're going to discuss that to wrap things up here on Locked On Nittany Lions. So there is pressure. And I know that James Franklin says that, well, expectations haven't changed. Our expectation is to win a national title. Duh. I know that's the answer, but now you have Jim Knowles. Penn State spent over $3 million. You have the coordinators that you wanted in Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles. These were your first choices. You now have them. You were able to upgrade a position coach that you lost late in the cycle in Stan Drayton, and then you were able to bring back your core players, quarterback, 2-star running backs, offensive line, key players on the defense, then add, right? We haven't seen Penn State do that yet in the transfer portal, where they'll add a key player, an Arnold Ebiketie, right? But not where they go and get a player of need at a premium position and the top player available. They played the transfer portal free agency with Trevor Pena and Amari Campbell. They were able to upgrade positions of need with the best available players. That cost a pretty penny. You know that for a fact. So Penn State is buying into itself. Penn State is buying into that. This is the year for James Franklin. It's more than just a national title for me. I think a national title does somewhat cure all, but I still want to see them beat Ohio State, win a Big Ten conference title, both the regular season and the championship game itself. So it's kind of juggling all of that. A national title, if they say they were to lose to Ohio State, not make the Big Ten conference championship, or they lose it, but they win a national title, again, that's going to fix everything. But this, again, it's the season to beat Ohio State, because I don't know when you're going to get on this level of a playing field with the Buckeyes, and you might even, by the time that game rolls around, be favored ahead of them with where the spread is right now.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what Ohio State kind of looks like as they go through the season. Right? If I'm saying I think they lose open that opener against Texas, who knows what else happens during the season, how they look. I think that college fans are having to come to terms with the fact that in previous seasons and previous decades, college football, you basically went undefeated or had one loss and you then won the national title, right? There was very, very few. I think LSU in 2007 might have had 2 losses, but other than that, you almost always had a team that either had a perfect season or they only had that one loss. So it was, as you're saying, right? The national title was like the cherry on top, and it was definitive. Last season, as we saw, right, Ohio State wins this national title, and yet their season, they didn't even play in the Big Ten championship game. They lose to Michigan, all these other things. Not to say that title isn't as rewarding. I mean, I'm not an Ohio State fan, so I don't know. But compared to some other years, it's just different. And just college football fans at large kind of have to get on with that. Where, yeah, Penn State, not to say that the game on November 1st isn't important, but right, Penn State doesn't need to beat Ohio State on November 1st to win the national title. In fact, I mean, I don't want to say it's a better that they do lose, because they have changed seedings and stuff like that. But like we saw last year, right, Oregon beats Penn State in the Big Ten championship, and then they get a bad draw, end up getting Ohio State as Penn State's playing Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl versus the Rose Bowl. Yeah. So not to diminish the Penn State Ohio State game on November 1st, but it's just Yeah, it doesn't have as much juice as it has in previous years where, man, if I remember in like 2009 when Penn State lost to Iowa in the whiteout, and I want to say that was like late September as well. Penn State lost that game, and I was like, well, not going to win the national title this year. That is no longer the case. To answer your question about too much pressure, though, and I don't know if I talked about it here, I talked about it on the BSD YouTube show, but one of the things I really like about this team is, right, they're led by Drew Allar, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Denai Desun, all these guys who were big time recruits, right? Drew Allar could have went basically anywhere he wanted to. Nick Singleton could have went anywhere he wanted to. Denai Desun could have went to Georgia. Katron Allen could have went to any number of SEC schools, and they came to Penn State, but they have known for a long time.
At Penn State.
Yes, and they have stayed at Penn State, yes, as well, in this transfer portal era and NIL era, right? They have stayed at Penn State. So I think that there's this confidence there with them, being that they have been, 5-star top 100 prospects for dating back to high school, and what they've accomplished at Penn State, right? They've won a ton of games. Basically, since they've enrolled in that 2022 season, Penn State they have won 10 games every single season. They won a Rose Bowl. They won a Fiesta Bowl. They hosted a college football playoff game. They played in the Big Ten championship. Those are all really good things, but yet they hadn't gotten that next step, right? A Rose Bowl was really nice, but you lose to Ohio State and Michigan that year. You win the Fiesta Bowl last year, but you fall to Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl. You go to the Big Ten championship game, but you lose it. So despite the fact that they've won a lot and they have a chance to go down as like one of the most winningest recruiting classes of all time, they still haven't hit that national title. They haven't won that Big Ten championship. So it's kind of like a happy medium of a group that has accomplished a lot, knows they're really talented, knows that they're good enough, but yet they just need to get over that hump, which is, I think, kind of where you want to be at in sports, and specifically college sports, when you have a senior class that's like this.
Expectations come with the territory.
Yeah.
I mean, you bring back a third-year starting quarterback, 2 college star running backs that could have been NFL prospects, second round, third round. They would have been drafted, I think, day 2 or early day 3 at Katron Allen specifically. But those guys were top 10 running backs in the draft rankings. Denai Dennis Sutton could have in theory gone on, right? When you bring all of that back, you're going to be expected to capitalize on what you did a season ago. Penn State, I do think, needs to beat Ohio State. Okay. It's kind of the same thing with the national title or bust theory, meaning that when you're going to lose all of this, when you're going to have all this turnover, we might see a coordinator leave with Andy Kotelnicki, some key position coaches, kind of like Ohio State, kind of like Michigan, where the Michigan different circumstances, but you still won the national title and then had this complete radical turnover where you're losing key components to what made you a national championship team. I don't know that Penn State has that in 2026, 2027, and especially with Oregon and Ohio State, they are going to be rising in better versions of themselves in 26, 27, etc. So Penn State's going to have an uphill battle, whereas they are at the top. They are in the mix, but they are at the top of the mountain here. And are they going to stay at the top, or are they going to be pushed off? So that's why I say you got to beat Ohio State. If they had won a couple years back, or it's been 3 or 4 years, it's been a decade, Pat. It's been a decade. I would say I would be content if Penn State wins against Ohio State. Maybe they lose in the Big Ten championship and they win a national title. Okay, that's then the Big Ten title. You're going to forget about it. You're not even going to remember it. They beat the Buckeyes in Columbus. In theory, they win a national title. That's kind of the best case scenario, if you will. I think, and they might play Ohio State twice. So if they beat Ohio State at some point this season, whether it's in the regular season or in the Big Ten championship or in the postseason, maybe they play each other 3 times. They have to beat them at least once. And you would like to see that happen in the most consequential game possible.
I agree with all of that. I will take a national title any way it comes. I like beating Ohio State, like when it comes to Penn State's rival, not rival, whatever it might be, I don't have a true disdain for Ohio State, the program. They have just been winning so much. But as soon if Ohio State went and just all of a sudden they had a dry spell and they went 8-4 and 7-5 and then 10-2 and then 8-4, I really wouldn't care about Ohio State. But yeah, there's something to when a team just, I don't want to say dominates you because it hasn't been domination, but the way that Penn State going back to 2017 just the way that they lose to them, like it's almost impossible. And I know, right, a lot of the talk is Penn State fans should expect to beat Ohio State. Ohio State recruits at this level and that level and whatever it might be. But yet, if you look at all those games, like the chances that a team loses, 8 times in a row? 8 times in a row in those circumstances, it's just so small. So yeah, certainly would be nice to get the monkey off the back. I know Ty Hildenbrand for Solid Verbal has predicted that Penn State loses November 1st. Rematch in the Big Ten Championship. Penn State wins the Big Ten Championship, which, hey, I'll take that. If for whatever reason Penn State loses to Ohio State on November 1st, and then they play in the Big Ten Championship and lose, and then they play in the National Championship and lose, I'm not going to be on the internet anymore, Zach. You're going to have to find somebody else to come on the YouTube show, because I'm flat out done with it all. So just definitely don't lose them 3 times is my request this year.
Yeah, or if you play them 3 times,
win once.
Win once, but also win the one that's the most consequential. Yes. Okay, so then if you lose in Columbus, if you lose in the Big Ten Championship, somehow you see them in the college football playoff semifinals. That'd be crazy. I'd love it, though. I would love a 3-part series with Penn State and Ohio State this season, because I think it would be really entertaining. Obviously, I don't need to justify it that way. But yeah, if you go 0-3 and they're the reason that you are kept from all of your goals this season, yeah, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. So I'm glad we definitely agree on that there. He's Pat Corbler, writer, covers Penn State football for Black Shoe Diaries. Links to his work will be down in the description. Thank you to each and every one of you for checking out this episode. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. If you're not already, become an everydayer, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. My name is Zach Sako, your host as always. Pat, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it, and can't wait to have a follow-up conversation about Penn State's goals, Penn State's expectations, and so much more, because this is easily the best team that they've had since 2017. So hopefully they do the things that the 2017 team did not.
Yep. Thank you so much, Zach. Appreciate you having me on.